Thanks for listening to Baxie's Musical Podcast. If you like what you hear today, be sure to like it, rate it, review it, give it a big fat 5-star review, and share it with everyone you know. You can also follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok for regular updates to find out about upcoming guests. Today, we're brought to you by Metro Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, and Ram at Chicopee. Be sure to check out their state-of-the-art dealership next to BJ's and Big Y on Memorial Drive, or check out MetroJeep.com and make it Metro, and then drive home in your new Metro Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, Ram today.
It's Baxie's Musical Podcast.
Hey, here's a fun fact. Did you know that in 2001, Michael Jackson released the most expensive album ever made? The name of that record was Invincible, and according to a very quick Google search, it took between $30 to $40 million to make. Now, granted, it sold 2.5 million copies, making it one of the worst-selling records of Michael Jackson's career, but it still cost him $30 to $40 million, which is probably among one of the many reasons why he would never go on to make another one. On the other end of the spectrum, you have the Minutemen, who in 1984 released the wildly influential 45-song double album called Double Nickels on the Dime, considered to be one of the most important and critically acclaimed albums ever made. The total cost of production, $1,100. And by Minutemen standards, that would be the most expensive album that they would ever make, especially when you consider that in 1983, their 8-song EP, Buzz or Howl Under the Influence of Heat, was completed with a budget of just $50. How is that even possible? Well, that's part of the magic of the Minutemen. The Minutemen were a trio out of San Pedro, California, whose motto, "We Jam Econo," was both a call to action and a way of life, one that continues to this day. The band featured the late D. Boon on guitar, Mike Watt on bass, and George Hurley on drums. And while they were regarded as a hardcore punk band, the reality was these guys were outstanding musicians that played some of the most intelligent and esoteric music of its time, sharing more in common with jazz musicians than with traditional hardcore bands of its day. The Minutemen would stay together for one more year until the motorcycle death of D. Boon in 1985 at the age of 27. In 1986, both Mike Watt and George Hurley would join fIREHOSE upon the insistence of Minutemen fan and guitar player Ed Crawford. fIREHOSE would go on to release 5 albums before breaking up 8 years later. Now, for some, that might be the end of the story, unless you're Mike Watt, who might just be the hardest working man in show business, maybe any business. After the breakup of fIREHOSE, Mike Watt would go on to enjoy one of the most prolific careers anywhere in the world. He's played with Iggy Pop and the Stooges, with Porno for Pyro, Jay Mascis from Dinosaur Jr., Thurston Moore from Sonic Youth, and countless projects that have made Mike Watt one of the most in-demand bass players in the world. He's also enjoyed an amazing solo career, including 1995's incredible Ball Hog or Tugboat, in which he was joined by Eddie Vedder of Pearl Jam, Mark Lanigan from the Screaming Trees, Henry Rollins, members of Sonic Youth, the Circle Jerks, Chris Novoselic and Dave Grohl from Nirvana, and Flea from the Red Hot Chili Peppers, and dozens more. Truth be told, Mike Watt is one of the most respected bass players anywhere, landing on the NME's list of the top 40 bass players of all time. The LA Weekly listed him at number 6 on their list of the 20 greatest bass players of all time. He was also given a Lifetime Achievement Award by Bass Player magazine, and in 1991, Flea and the Red Hot Chili Peppers dedicated their best-selling album, Blood Sugar Sex Magic, to Mike Watt himself. Mike Watt continues to be insanely active today, not only with a bunch of new projects set to release music over the next few months, he continues to play live and produce his podcast, The Watt from Pedro Show. All of it still embracing the We Jam Econo philosophy that he has embraced for the last 46 years. To talk about all of that is my guest today, the legendary Mike Watt, on Baxie's Musical Podcast. How you doing?
Glad to talk with you.
Yeah, I appreciate you doing this today. I really do. I'm just going to get right into it. Last summer, I interviewed Mike Baggetta. You guys had just released the last MSSV record, and he grew up like 12, 13 miles from here. And I know you've been involved in a million things since, but I really thought it was like an interesting concept about what you guys were doing, that you were kind of creating music on stage with the idea of maybe recording it later on, as opposed to the other way around, where you write a song and then you play it live. I just thought that was like a really cool kind of a jazzy trio way of doing things. That was a really cool idea.
I mean, it wasn't maybe, it was
Yeah.
good idea, him, because you do the whole tour and then it's the last gig. I mean, it was the third time he did it. So the last gig would be at Zebulon in Frogtown, part of Silver Lake. The next day we make the album. Everything's first take because you've been doing it a whole tour. Yeah, also West Mass, Jay Mascis. Thurston lived there for a little bit, Northampton.
Yep.
Jay Mascis, Amherst. Mike Baguette, Springfield. Mike Baguette is 20 years younger than me. He also booked the tours himself. He don't use an agent. He's used a lot of the ethics from the movement that I became part of, like 45, more than that. Yeah, almost 50 years ago. It shows you that it wasn't really a haircut or style of music. It was a way of doing things. I mean, and some of it goes back to Walt Whitman putting out Leaves of Grass in 1855. I mean, interesting about that. People ask me about the old days, and I say it was about people, but I think the new days is about people too.
Yeah.
And Mike Baguette, I mean, that wouldn't happen when I was his age, or worse, high school. You didn't play with people that were 20 years younger. So I'm glad that shit's all changed.
Yeah. I bet
Hey, we got another tour coming. Actually, that band you're talking about is over.
Yeah.
SSV. Yeah. He's got a new thing. In December, we recorded a 7-inch. He's still got me on bass, but he has a new drummer, man. Johnny Machine, he's called, but John Herndon, he was born with. He also plays in the band TARDIS. He's calling it Casa Sueño.
Is it the same kind of concept as you were doing with MSSV, or is it something different?
If you're talking about recording the album at the end of the tour, because the tour is going to be September, October, and it's going to be a West Coast tour only. You ain't going to be in your parts yet.
Okay.
We'll get to it. I know it. But he made a change. He wants to tour. He wants to make an album, not at the end, but in the middle in Portland. The Oregon one, the port side, not the starboard. Although the main one's good too.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's cool that you're still working with them, and it's cool that you guys have done things the way you have done it, because there's a musical conversation in improvisation that is different from the more traditional way of doing things. And I've always thought, that like even the Minutemen, it's always been funny to me that they were kind of labeled as a hardcore band, because I mean, to me, you guys defied genres. I mean, you were probably more of a jazz trio than maybe anything else. And that conversation that you have musically is similar in a lot of ways too.
Well, I don't think the movement was really about the sound. It was, when I look back at those days, it was kind of I think the 70s was a strange period. I learned this from helping the Stooges for 126 months. There was a whole thing going on in the 60s with small clubs, little labels, fanzines that just got lost. Remember, me and D. Boon, Georgie, we're 13 years old in 1970. There's this weird era. When I say rock and roll, I don't mean Little Richard, the real stuff, Jerry
Right.
Lee Lewis. I'm talking about this weird, strange thing called arena rock. And it's kind of like Nuremberg rally shit, right? And we were ignorant of what, I'm reading. Like right now, I got James Kaplan's. I just read I've been writing all these bios on these bebop guys, and just finished one on Ornette Coleman from Marie Golia, and Jonathan Grassie's one on Eric Dolphy before that. A lot of this stuff was going on. And Mike Baguette is school.
Yeah.
He went to Rutgers. One of the books I read, Lewis Porter on John Coltrane, he actually jammed with this guy, took classes. Yusef Lateef was one of his professors, the flute man, the guy who made with Michael Olatunji, made a collective with John Coltrane to teach young people. I mean, a lot of this stuff was going along. So when you said hardcore, which I guess was a subgenre of the movement, right? I remember D. Boon say the first time we saw hardcore was when Ian was advertising his Minor Threat band, Discord,
Yeah.
because all the bands are from DC and hardcore Discord. I think there was something like that, and Black Flag was considered, right. But more important, besides the style of music, Black Flag, the idea of them building a tour circuit that we're still on today. In a way, Mike Baguetta is part of that thing. The trip about it being loose enough where you can play anything you want. That's what's important. And the thing that you thought right away, it should be a fast beat per minute guitar
Right.
thing, right? Whereas if you knew 70s punk, I mean, the first band that could sell out the whiskey here in West Hollywood was the Screamers. They didn't even have a guitar player. At first, the movement was really, about Throbbing Gristle. I mean,
Sure.
what was that?
Yeah.
And what funded their label? Industrial Records. One of them did artwork that did the Pink Floyd.
That's right.
Guy
Yeah.
Hand, Hypnosis.
Hypnosis.
You see how things are actually more collision of things and not so easily, like the idea of music having genre names. It's just ridiculous. But sometimes, especially for marketing purposes, I could see them want to simplify things. But that's why maybe Minutemen confuse you with that, because I remember or maybe we were just gullible, because anarchy sounds like no coercion. I mean, you have the freak flag fly. You didn't look at it as some kind of violence thing. It means no coercion. So, like we Jam Econo, that's not a slogan. I mean, our daddies, were working. We didn't have the bones, so you just, bang for a buck. It ain't always the cheapest, because sometimes you have to buy it twice. It ends up costing more, right? So it came after the Ford van, because some kind of in fact, D. Boon thought that was the political thing of the Minutemen, was the economy. Again, our experience with arena rock, you couldn't hear the bass in the drums. So that was one big thing about us going to a club the first time. You could hear the bass in the. Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of things about the club thing. The club thing was kind of like the record store. You talk to people, you meet, you start bands. You don't start bands at arena rock show. Think about no, we got to make fun of this shit, because I think that's the reason. Because I found out a lot of the stuff we learned in the movement in the 70s was not really new.
Right.
We're hearing the Damned record, New Rose, right? The first punk 45. And man, it sounded a lot like My Generation, or, Can't Explain. I thought it was going to be synthesizers, their look and everything, It was synthesizers, but some of it was just old-timey guitar. Some of it was whatever you got up on the stage. That was one of the righteous things about going to a gig. You didn't know what you were going to see.
Yeah.
Nervous Gender had a 5-year-old ended This guy end up deported, right, for being a kid from Sweden. I mean, the unpredictability. So I'm glad we got to surprise you with Minutemen, with you thinking we were supposed to be something else. Now we're also SST002.
That's right.
And then Greg ends up signing a trio of trios, Husker Du and Meat Puppets. We're all using bass, drum, guitar, but you can tell us apart pretty
easily. Absolutely. Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned the arena rock.
About anything, but I'm just trying to bring this shit up.
No, I understand. It's funny that you bring up arena rock. You always hear stories of all these small shows that they see the first time people in like Manchester, England see the Sex Pistols. Everybody in that building winds up starting a band. It's hard to imagine anyone starting a band after paying $300 for a ticket in an arena to see a show anymore.
Yeah. I heard the same thing about there was a Beefheart gig in Akron, Ohio. I think there's the only ones in Ohio. But the Perubu guys were there. The Devo guys were there.
Yep.
The Numbers band that had the Pretender singer brother, maybe she was there too. but there it is key things like that. You're right. And arena rock. Okay, our first gig, me and D Boon saw was arena rock. It was, in fact, we didn't go to a club thing until the movement. So our first gig was T-Rex, and we really liked T-Rex, which was kind of a small band for those days in the U.S. We found out later it was huge in England. But man, he was this big. Well, I didn't even know basses had bigger strings. I was so far away. When D Boon mom puts me on bass, and I don't know what a bass is. I thought it was. You could see in the pictures it looked like a guitar with four. Then I remember. So for first couple of years, I played a guitar with only 4 strings, and then I saw this thing in a music store, Chuck Sound Music here in Pedro, and this guy told me it was a bass. I was thinking, no wonder there's only 4. Of course, I told him I know that, but I fucking did not know that. That was the other thing. And some people think it was better days. Well, you can find all kinds of musics on the YouTube.com. I don't think that's a bad thing.
No.
You don't have to search for it. Well, you still search because one thing leads to another thing. You're listening, right? Oh, I remember when we lost Jack Bruce, I was playing in Mobile, and I owed that guy so much. I got all bourboned up, and I was just watching these things. I couldn't have done that. Well, I could have got bourboned up, but I couldn't have watched Jack Bruce again. There is lame things about all kinds of things humans makes, but it's how it's wielded, I think. Right? So maybe there's something good about big events, arena rock. I don't know. There's something about a little gig, though. You're right.
Yeah, absolutely. Some of the best gigs I ever saw had like 25, 30 people in them. And it was like, those are the ones you remember forever.
Here's the other trick. Yeah, being close enough to see Lorna Doom's got bigger strings, right? But the other thing is when they get done playing, the Germans get done playing, the guy who was standing next to me, he's on stage. And then there's Pat. I can rap with Pat. Or Don or Darby.
Yeah.
That did not happen at Arena Rock.
No, definitely not.
You know what I mean? It was a trip. So it was like, I remember Joey Ramone saying, and get this was at RFK Stadium, one of these, because in the 90s, right? He said it was like, punk to me, Mike, is like a big hay wagon. If you got something to bring, come on. And to have this guy, not Robert Johnson turning his back so you don't learn his licks. He's like, come on. That was something.
That's an amazing part of a small show. And I still, to this day, prefer that than dishing out, hundreds of dollars to see a half-ass show, bloated, done in front of tracks. I mean, it's like a different world now, and it's unfortunate. It's really disappointing.
So that had big effect on us.
Yeah.
And also the bands we saw that influences. I can't imagine Minutemen without that Hollywood scene, without them trippy records we got at Zed of London from overseas or from New York or from, Orange County or the Valley. I mean, you know how it is. You can get balkanized in your culture thing. And,
sure.
And that's art is a fabric, And and the only thing new is you finding out about it. But then what's to be done? Right here, right? Nice pocket knife. But really, are you just going to build a shrine for the pocket knife, or was it going to get carved with it? So that's the way I look at the movement too.
Yeah.
And that's why I think it did not die. It wasn't just one little thing. You notice those things you read about, Dada, surrealist, futurist, beat, hippie, all these things. But the one that keeps going is this word they gave for a guy who gets fucked in jail for cigarettes, right? It keeps going because it probably took parts of all those things, and instead of keeping it nailed to this brand or something, it's the next kid who picks up the fucking or older cat. Remember, Vincent paints his last 10 years, ends up selling only one painting. This idea, I think humans have always been with it, and we finally made enough sense to in a weird way institutionalized.
Mm.
Why not always have a place, where the freak flag can fly? And like you get to do your show here,
Mm-hmm.
that's like you having your own fanzine. See, that's another thing I think is connected to the movement is the fanzine thing. And I really thought when the internet came in and people could have their own websites, we wouldn't just go to these corporate things, everybody'd have their own. But Pat Boone sold more Tutti Fruttis and Little Richards. So humans are tricky species. But Mike Baguette, that's another thing. Some guy who learned off of a thing that I was learning off of, but then I learned things from him.
Yeah.
Because he invents it for his moment. He tried this thing. He told me about moving to New York after getting educated and its food chain and, who's going to get this, the thing. But when it goes from the talk show guest to the commercials, there's a little music. There's only so many gigs there. So he left all that and decided to get in the boat, your own tour and stuff like this, right? So why somebody educated in this thing? That shows you there maybe the aesthetic is informed by the ethic. That's why I think it's important about the movement. What's important about me still playing with people like Mike Baguette and not really hanging out at what's in Las Vegas. They got a museum, just something.
Oh yeah, the punk rock museum.
Oh, has odor to it. Yeah, I think it's only the real thing is house living.
Yeah,
it's cats like Mike Baguette, or whoever's out there. I just found a band of young people called Choo Choo in the Northeast, and they are asking me, "How do you do gigs?" These guys want me to pay money to get streams, and you know what I mean? Isn't it?
Yeah.
It's kind of it almost bum you out totally, right? Send him. I get Mike Baguette's email address. He's got some connects. Right? It's people talking to each other, passing around the. I'll get a shot and play here and play there. I mean, that's the only way. You can't. I don't think put your hands in the either whatever the forces that be or the trends that be. Sometimes you just got to be a person.
Well, I mean, in a real way, it's almost like a social. Even back then, it was kind of like a social media, but at a more ground level. I mean, the connections, the people, and
it was more the phone.
Yeah,
it was the phone.
Absolutely.
It was, Chuck Dukowski's phone book list.
Right.
The whole tour, the phone. It was the phone. And then you think about even before that, there was vaudeville, there was fucking even minstrel. You can believe it. Probably a lot of our roots is in Al Jolson. But before Al Jolson, the early 18. I got Richard Meltzer's buddy Nick Tosh's his first book is Twisted Roots of Country Music and rock and roll. And if you can believe minstrel. Yeah, they found out that dudes lived longer if you let them play music and have some fun. And then you start digging on it. You dress up like them and you start playing like them. There's no records yet. There's no radio. You got to actually go to the towns, build up the touring circuit. I mean, we're standing on the shoulders of giants. Yeah, it's up to us to be today and not be fucking Xerox machines and rubber stamps. But there are traditions that keep, you want to write 12 poems to start the Civil War, and no one will put it out. You print it yourself. Walt Whitman, right? You did some whaling for a couple of years. You want to write a book about it as an excuse to talk about everything else. Mr. Melville. He's from kind of where you're from. Upstate New York. It ain't too far. I played Berkshire's, this West Mass part, by the New York border. Yeah, the Wilco guys invented. They have a festival there. It's an old factory town. They turned into a museum place.
In North Adams. Yeah,
that's it. North Adams. So shit gets repurposed because of these ethics. You see, that's what's transcendent, right? That's the thing that moves through. These technologies, names, these language, the different people from different towns and stuff. But these ethics, that's what I see in common. Ain't it trippy? They don't really get old-fashioned.
Yeah,
right? They stay relevant. They stay because they have to almost. Because if you give it up to somebody it gets into some merch thing that's all lame and tired of Fonzie and Potsy and shit like that. I mean, Mayberry, drunk guy locks himself up, right? The one drunk guy. It just gets so bizarre. And look, art is for pretending. John Fogerty's from a very Northwest bayou. But he also wrote all them, so he produced himself. I read this thing about, he thought Doug Clifford, I had got to have him on my Watt from Pedro show, and he didn't tell me this, but I read this. John Fogerty thought the drum beat was a little off. So in those days, you had to cut the tape. He went to his house and gave him the pieces of tape he cut out. Here's your drum. Your clams, right? Buddy Rich would call them clams.
Right.
But this idea of getting your hands dirty with your work, I mean, it's interesting. John Coltrane, they didn't have vans yet, so they toured in station wagons, and his favorite kind was Country Squire. Right. And some people say, oh, that's irrelevant. But no, he had to get to the towns to play those gigs.
Yeah. It's funny when you talk about this, and you mentioned, We Jam Econo earlier. And it's interesting how, when you really look at it, in totality, there's a real through line through what you've done to what everything you're talking about, like the economics of performing and making music and doing it in a way that's cost effective, but also in a way where you're not doing too much all at once. I mean, it's to describe, We Jam Econo is, I think for some people that may not quite get it, but what you're talking about, really, it's all the way through. That's really kind of interesting, the way that kind of builds.
Also, you always think of autonomy. If I put my ass in Hawk too deep, maybe I got to be Mersh, which is some weird ass, like, I'll write last week's hit in order to finance some lifestyle. Why not be careful and piece it out, like you said, and the autonomy to make sure you're in a situation where you can let the freak flag fly.
Yeah.
And you can write a Berlin, or you can write that joystick bullshit. Lou is interesting about Lou's thing, but if everything, like, look at the Racket, the movie Racket, they spend so much money. Can they really take chances?
No, they can't.
So it's these comic book movies over and over, where the guys who did the original comics make nothing on them. And these guys are just recycling the same ass. It's pewter generated, a lot of it, right?
So when you're younger and you and D Boon are talking about this We Jam Econo stuff, and it's this really kind of where
we like comics. We like the Mad Magazine one.
Yeah, right. Well, we all
got
did.
banned for a while.
But when you guys are starting off in the Minutemen and you're approaching music the way you did, to me, I've heard everybody talk about it like there aren't a lot of guitar players that you really enjoy other than D Boon. And I've heard that mentioned before. Yesterday would have been his 68th birthday. I mean, obviously you two were close, but
to be there.
Yeah. But
oh, fools.
What would you
know
say?
what D said about the Minutemen? He said, man, we should be able to play anything we want, and people still know it's Minutemen. And I didn't have to teach him songs I wrote. He didn't teach me songs he wrote, because that's one advantage of growing up. His mom put me on when we met when we were 12. I couldn't live in the Navy housing anymore here, and I met him in this park. He had bad eyes, and he jumped out of a tree. He thought I was his neighbor. So the sea changed because of luck. But we put the time in. We're with each other. And so, yeah, I really like him. The closest guitarist to him I found is Nels Cline.
Mm.
There's some guys I like. Jay Mascis I like a lot.
Sure.
Thirst. I like Mike Baguetta. I like Kirk Kirkwood. D Boon was a big fan of Kirk Kirkwood, the Meat Puppet guy.
Yeah.
I like Bob Mole.
Yep.
I remember asking Bob Mole who his favorite guitarist was, because that's what it was with the Huskers. Me and D Boon put out their first album.
That's right.
Man Speed. Because being part of the movement was also having a label, besides fanzine, a band, and all. Yeah, you did. So It'd be 8 hours of Bob, 8 hours of Grant, 8 hours of Greg. You'd rap with it because they're Minneapolis. Anyway, I asked Bob his favorite guitars. He said Johnny Thunders.
Yeah.
So a lot of these guys, when I look at that, maybe not, well, Nels Klein's a technician, but a lot of these guys are stylists. They just got real strong style. Maybe that's what I liked. But one thing about D Boon was like, because playing with him, I could just play, and the guy we spent the most time with teaching the songs was Georgie, because we met him after high school. And so, and D Boon was adamant about bringing the drums in. He wanted to make it a three-way conversation. That's what he thought was political about the band. He thought the lyrics was more about thinking out loud. In fact, he thought mine were too spacey. So I used a landlady's note once. But that's one, I really felt obligated to that man because he was so open with me.
Yeah.
And it seemed like a lot of guitar players, because of the arena rock thing, wanted to run the show. And he wasn't like that. He also really was intrigued. There was this band in England called the Pop Group, and they put Captain Beefheart with Funkadelic. And this thing, so he started listening to R&B and the way the guitar players, he thought this was one way to get the drums and the bass up, is what the R&B guys were doing. Plays trebly and little, clipped things, so you'd make room for these guys. Yeah, so he was a big picture man, and maybe that's why I really liked him. He was also a guy who got me into history. I only read fiction and stuff, especially science fiction. Sputnik, I was born in 57. But he got me into history and stuff like that. So D Boon always, he was more realistic. And that's why I looked up to him. And it wasn't like he was looking for other people to prop him up. He wanted to put together a thing, he wanted to make a thing. He always made you feel involved, even though he had the guitar, it was like him putting the little bit of wet blankie on, which was a big dealio. It seemed like the guitar players with arena rock, it was a big deal about it. And there's people like Jimmy, I mean, who kind of deserved it. But then you find out Jimmy played fucking a lot of bass on the records. And then with this one interview, he says, Mitch Mitchell, he's my Elvin Jones. I remember when I heard that.
Yeah.
Raymond Pettibone started taking me to these gigs. I got to see Elvin Jones like 15 times because of Raymond. He would live in Nagasaki, so his first gigs were up in Hollywood all the time. Last time was though in Culver City, and Charlie Watts was there with Les McCann. Charlie Watts was wearing 3 overcoats, but they were in front watching him, and I could see that's what really got me this thing. Music is music, and yeah, we're from different times, but what a great thing to connect us. And why let genre and shit get in the way? When I heard Jimmy say that, and then reading about all these books on John Coltrane, where when he had McCoy and Jimmy holding it down while he would solo with Elvin. That's what Jimmy was thinking of. So when I think of Georgie and D Boon wanted to bring him in, even though he didn't grow up with Georgie, and he of course was there for me. You got to know this man too. Yeah, he had the technique. He was real. Okay, when I met him, he only knew Creedence. That's the only rock and roll band, CCR. So I, of course, I had to learn fuck Mardi Gras. But the other 6 albums, you go on my boat, you're going to hear them all in order, right? Right. So I learned them all. I couldn't hear the bass, of course, 5 inches of grape juice and 10 quarters to keep it from skipping. But I saw the singers' shirts. That's how I got into the finals. But then I turned him on to Buck Dharma, the Oyster Cult. He got into Buck Dharma big time. So he's this weird mix between John Fogerty and Buck Dharma. And then the Movement.
Yeah.
Like the Pop Group and Wire. That was another big band with the little songs, this album called Pink Flag.
Yeah, great band.
But yeah, D Boon wasn't afraid of that stuff. Learning from other people. We're here to learn. I remember one of the skater made a sticker out of one thing he said in an interview. He goes, "Punk is whatever we made it to be," which
That's
is
right.
so econo. But it's like, yeah, how can you get wrong with that?
Yeah.
It's a good thing. You ain't going to get dated with something like that. And so D Boon had this knack for this open thing, even though he could play like a motherfucker too, and also hard charger. He'd break strings and keep playing. Yeah, he would not stoop. D Boon didn't use effects. He started using this thing for some solos on records, little green box. But he was really about this honesty thing. I
I mean,
really admired.
I mean, that's one of the things that was so great about those records is there was a real honest sound about it, and clearly, unlike a lot of guys that were in punk bands at the time, I mean, you guys were all exceptional musicians. I mean, I think one of the things that often gets overlooked is what a great drummer George was. I mean,
Oh yeah,
people
right.
talk about great drummers, but if they really listen to what he was doing along with you and D, it's like, Jesus Christ, that guy was so freaking good and overlooked. I think he's unfortunately underrated. I really truly do.
And he's the guy actually, because we don't know about this jazz thing till the movement. Georgie's getting these records as a teenager because he wants to learn how to play drums and stop making surfboards. So he sees Max Roach at the Lighthouse while he's still a teenager. He's way before me and D Boon. People don't know that. He also wrote a lot of the good. He wrote like a quarter of the words on Double Nickels on the Dime.
Did he write that much, really?
Oh yeah, oh yeah. See, people overlook. He wrote the first song over 2 minutes, the anchor on "What Makes a Man Start Fires." That's a trippy, right? That's the record I wrote all the songs. I was having knee surgery at the time, so I was home the most. Uh, but that's how strong a personality D Boon was too,
Yeah.
because he was using this thing from Arena Rock, the guitar singer, and so people put a lot of that on that. But personally, if you knew the man, he was all about the band. He would never be comfortable as the man. D Boon was in the movements things like, Joe Hill lived 2 years here. We had it's a bodega now. We had an IWW hall. D Boon put on own shows. He renamed this theater he'd rent out called the Star. He renamed it the Union so people didn't have to drive to Hollywood. D Boon was about not being a celebrity. He was a guy who made things happen. I don't think people realize that. Oh yeah, he's part of the hardcore band playing good guitar. I think part of us knowing how to play was because we copied off record. That was the 70s thing. You copied off records.
Right.
We didn't write songs. We never wrote one song till the movement.
Yeah.
Now I have people on the show. My show is 25 years now.
Congratulations.
And I always ask the question, what did you start playing? And everybody's writing songs that came later. Nobody from everybody copied off records. So I'm amazed by these guys.
What's interesting about it to me is like, when you have a guy who is that charismatic and means so much to, the movement and to the band. And when you lose a guy like that, the idea of going into another band, another trio, I mean, that had to be a really hard thing to do after, having this amazing, experience with your best friend, and then going into fIREHOSE and doing something.
Oh, I didn't go into
different.
Edward, I didn't know, Mike. I didn't know you had to pay to have your phone number not put in the book. And this guy from Ohio calls up and just comes over. So I didn't really start that, man.
Yeah.
I was in a bad place. Yeah, I did. I stopped playing bass. Thurston got me to do this record, Chicopee Youth.
Oh yeah. Yep.
I came into the studio. They were doing Evil with Martin Beastie, and that was the first time I played bass after he got killed. And then Edward calls me up and comes, and we kind of do Minutemen without D Boon, with Edward instead. And Georgie again's with me. So I got to play 14 years with him. And Edward comes on. We do 20 tours in 7.5 years. But I got to say, a lot of that, he's a trumpet His parents were music teachers, musicians, and they sent him to Ohio State for trumpet, but he wanted to play guitar. And he comes over to my house. We make this band. I took some wood. I lived in a little one-room place on 14th Street, Peter, and I found wood in the alley, and I made a big bench. And I said, "You can conk under here." The place was built before electricity, so it only had one outlet. But when we start the band, but it would have never happened. Firehose would not have happened without Edward. And so we're using the momentum from the Minutemen. So when you ask me how to, because it sounds like it was a question, how do you keep going? Well, maybe you want to talk to Edward because it was Edward. He wanted to do it.
Yeah.
And he came over. And and when he came over, he had like Bleached Hair and he had U2 records and he had REM records, which was interesting because the last tour we do is with this band REM, who we knew nothing about till they asked us to tour with them. They were really nice guys, righteous guys. And it ends up the last tour, and Edward knows their music. And we wrote a song the first day he came. So I asked Georgie, I said, let's try this. He wants to do this. He came over here. Let's try this. So we do all that. And then, I try this thing where I don't have one band. Because I did try a second band right at the end of Minuteman, just two basses called Dose. And I did that for 30 years. But after Firehose, I try this thing where I'm going to make a band for each project. And that's what I've been kind of doing for the last 32 years since Firehose. I would say that's my own kind of decision more. Nobody came over and told me to do that. Where Firehose, you got to give Edward a lot of credit. And that guy, I owe him a lot for doing that. That was a bad time for me. I was really not together at all. And Raymond that's when Raymond really starts bringing me to these jazz gigs, these little gigs with these guys from the older days, Mr. Ray Brown, Cecil McBee. I told you about Elvin Jones, Max Roach, Robbie Coltrane, John Coltrane's second son. I saw with Elvin. It was really trippy seeing, and then Sun Ra, people like Ema Sumac, little Jimmy Scott, all these Blind Al Hibbler, things that were little. It reminded me of seeing the Germs, seeing the Bags, the first punk gigs.
Mm-hmm.
In a way, I got my second wind, but it was, of course, for Firehose, it was easier for crowds because there was punk on college radio because of REM. More people come see us. A lot more people saw Firehose than ever saw the Minutemen. But in another ways, I was way worse shape. It was really hard for me to write songs. I used a lot of those songs for Firehose. I didn't know Edward. Sometimes it was 3 tours a year, most of the time in that band.
Yeah.
But we really played a lot. It was a hard time for me. After that, another thing I started doing after that was helping other people. First, it was Porno for Pyros. Then it was Jay Mascis. Then it was Stooges. That was a different thing for me. Music was something I got into to be with D. Boon. I wasn't really a musician, right? I got into music to be with my friend. And then you brought up the fact I lost him, but I kept going. I'm 68 now. And I owe him everything. But there's these other cats too. Georgie, Edward. I got to help Tav Falco, the Flipper guys, Brother Ted, Steve DePacha. I'm involved because of the internet. I know a lot of lies and hate get spread, but trading files. I'm just right now doing halfway through 24 songs with Pete and John at Peg Legacies. I make albums with, I met them years ago, but I make albums with people I've never even met. I got things going all the time via the internet and in person too. Joe Baiza, a guy that goes back to Minutemen days, putting out a live thing with not so much live. Well, it was done live, improvised, right? Thing like Mike Baguetta, but even more with Chris Corsano, who's from Western Mass. There, you know what? It's all repercussions of this initial experience. The guy so kind to me to let me in on a creative endeavor. Even my Watt from Pito show is a payback on this debt I feel I owe. If I was given a shot, why shouldn't I give other people a shot?
When you look at the laundry list of things that you have done since all of this, it's amazing. You know, from the outside looking in, it almost seems like you don't sit down for a minute before you're playing with somebody else. I mean, I know that's not true. I mean, you do have you know, some time to do other things, but it's like you've never
every day.
Yeah.
I mainly do music. I really do a lot. And especially, I mean, today's 1190 days. You know, I drank whiskey for 50. And now that I stopped that, I really am playing. I am really playing. Today I got practice with Two Longshoremen, my second man, this band I put together for my second opera. I ended up writing 3 operas. I come from little songs. Yeah, it gets you going. Like I said, the pocket knife, what's to be, so maybe my life's the pocket knife, and me, you know, it's what do I do with it? You're right. A lot of lucky things have happened to me, but that's not enough. You got to do something with it.
I have to ask you about the whole thing with the Stooges from starting in 2003. First of all, how did that even come about that you joined them? Because that sounds, I mean, it makes all the sense in the world, but it's like, I mean, when I heard about it, I was like, holy shit, that's fantastic that they asked that Mike Watt got involved in this reunion for them.
Yeah, I was asked it, you know, it called me up. I was on tour with my second man. It was in Tallahassee. But okay, there's a movie. In fact, the singer REM produced it, Todd Haynes, called Velvet Goldmine.
Right. Yes.
Ronnie, the guitar man for Stooges, had been coming to my gigs in Greektown, part of Detroit. But this guy, this movie comes out, and the guy is asked to do the music for it, Don Fleming, and with his buddy Jim Dunbar, they think, hey, since one of these characters is kind of a David Bowie guy and the other one's a big cross with Kurt, why don't we get the guy who was actually in the Stooges? So then they asked me to play bass for this movie soundtrack in 1996. So I'm sitting across, you know, I met him. He's come to my gigs. So I'm with Minutemen and stuff. But now I'm going to play with him. I mean, the guy, you know, that's the real TVI. Well, people say 3 chords, right? That's 1 chord. But man, what a chord. And remember, I said I'm helping people. So I had helped Porno for Pyros. Now I'm going to help with this movie soundtrack the next year. Oh, I made a solo record with 48 people. So I'm getting used to playing with other people, coming from one guy in his bedroom, right? Jay makes a record called J Mascis in the Fog. And when he asked me to go on tour with, he made it all himself. He says, why don't you play bass? And when we come through, I don't like singing all the songs. Why don't you do some Stooges? Because, you know, he's really a drummer. He learned guitar by Funhouse. And when we were in Ann Arbor, he says, you know, Ronnie, why don't you call him up? And we ask him to come down there. And we do some Stooges songs with him. So Jay says, takes him on tour. So the last third of the gig is playing with Ronnie Stooges songs. Ig heard about this. So Ig asked me. Well, he said, Ronnie says, you're the man. When I answer that phone in Tallahassee. And then I fly out to Coachella. I thought it was going to be that one gig in March 2003, like he said. It turns out to be 126 months, yeah. But it's kind of J Mascis. Well, look at the situation. He made a situation. He wasn't pulling strings, but because he wanted to play with the guy he learned guitar from. He told me he learned drums. You know, he's a drummer first. He
Yeah.
had a band called Boon, and Lou played the guitar. And this Dinosaur was a joke band, he said, kind of in tribute of Meat Puppets 2, the second Meat Puppets album. Yeah, ain't it weird? And he said he learned off of drums off Georgie doing What Makes a Man Start Fires. I mean, it's all this shit's connected. It's bizarre. Told me his first haircut that he did on himself, he tried to look like the singer of the birthday party. And Jay
Nick
Vasquez is a
Cave.
trip. Yeah. He don't say a lot of words,
Yep.
but his mind is going.
Always
okay?
thinking. Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
Wow.
Big respect for the Northeast. There's a lot of stuff going. But Jay is the reason why I think I got to help the Stooges.
So what was it like to be playing with us? I mean, you played with them for a long time. I mean, I can't even imagine how cool that must have been.
I can't imagine there even being a movement without those guys. I mean, yeah, well, I'd ask him 10 million questions. I was finally, the youngest guy in the band. I was like a little brother. I felt I owed him my best notes, man. Those gigs seemed like to go by like 3-4 minutes. And they're the hardest gigs I've ever played in my life. So intense. Ig is incredible to be on stage with.
Oh, I bet.
But Ronnie and Scotty, brother Steve, also off stage. Ig about culture, Ronnie with history, Scotty and nature, brother Steve with politics. Really deep. I know Stooges sounds like idiots, right? But they were a fan. They were actually first called Psychedelic Stooges, and they shortened the name. They told me they asked Mo. They had to get on the phone with him. Mo said, "Okay, just don't say 3." But really interesting guys, man, and very, very kind to me. And I love the music.
Yeah.
I love the music. I mean, Stooges' music is really trippy. You listen to Funhouse, recorded in 1970, but it sounds like it could have been recorded next week. That thing is so, yeah. I would never guess that was going to fucking happen. Boon laughing at me, yeah, for sure, laughing.
So
Because in those days when we were boys, people did not like the Stooges.
Oh no!
Oh my God, fuck no! I mean, there's some what's called revision and some of these people, because I remember reading their reviews in the day and calling it the worst shit ever. It's funny about humans like that.
I remember as a kid, David Bowie and Iggy were both on the Dinah Shore show, and I think I was sick from school that day, and my mom is watching this, the Dinah Shore show in the middle of the day, and she's like, "What in God's name is this?" And I'm like, "I don't know, Mom. I think it's pretty cool." It was like, yeah, people were scared to death of both of them.
We were playing in Berlin, and we were by the Brandenburg Gate thing, where the wall was.
Yeah.
And we're driving, and Ig points out the window. He says, "Look, Mike, see above that garage? It was a mechanic. So that's where me and David live."
Oh, wow.
And he said that they had to get out of the Drogas was too heavy in SoCal. In fact, he never spent much time here, like his bad memories. But they went and did Idiot.
Yep.
He asked once what he liked. I don't know how this came up, but about his records, Ig records. And I said, I like the Idiot. He said, that was a very artistic record, but he did that one with him. And David did Low and Heroes on this little, he pointed it to me on the road.
It's amazing.
I'll tell you something about, we're talking about regions, and there's something about that Michigan, a Midwest thing that's very like, no front. I'll tell you exactly what they mean. Yeah, no front. I really dug that about those cats. They would put right there, look, you, and no wonder the music was like it was, and why the movement. I mean, it was stuff like Cat Beefheart too. I talked to him on the phone once. Said there was a call in, and I asked him about Strictly Personal. Well, those masks they were wearing, they were scary. He goes, "Yeah, they were scary." I read Mike Barnes' book, and I was like, "Oh my God!" But there's just something about music, right? And
Yep.
It's very personal with me with D. Boon. But then even with cats I didn't grow up with, Like me and you getting into this deep rap, and all we got to share is music. But that's how righteous that fucking thing is.
Yep, I agree. Well, I got to tell you, this has been an extraordinary pleasure to talk to you. I had all the fIREHOSE records. I've got all the Minutemen stuff, and I still think Ball Hog and Tugboat is one of the best things you've ever done. I love that freaking record. In fact, I interviewed Xander a while back, and after the interview was done, we talked about Piss Bottle Man for a good 15 minutes. It was it was great. It was just great. And so it's one of those records that I've always loved a lot.
I was thinking of pictures of Lily,
Mm.
Pete Townsend, and like his daddy gave him a girly magazine. Well, my pop gave me a piss bottle. But I kind of took the music, and Xander could play it like that.
Yeah. Great. Mike, I don't want to keep you forever, but I really appreciate the time that we got to spend today. I'd love to talk to you again sometime.
Anytime.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Have yourself a great afternoon. Take care, Mike. Thank you so much. To keep up with all the stuff that Mike Watt is up to, check out his website, hootpage.com. You should also check out his podcast, The Watt from Pedro Show. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, you can email me at bax@rock102.com. I'd love to hear what you think. Thanks, as always, to Metro Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, and Ram at Chicopee for their support. But most of all, thanks to you for listening to Baxie's Musical Podcast.